सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। हरिः ॐ श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः। हरिः ॐ। Have you ever felt like you're living somebody else's life? You've checked all the boxes: career, great, family, stable, success, been there, done that. Yet something deep down feels missing. You wake up each day, perform your part flawlessly. You are the dependable professional. You are the reliable friend. You are the problem solver everyone counts on. You are the one, when you're in a meeting, people know that this is going to get taken care of. But when the day ends, that's where that quiet voice just keeps whispering, is this it? That's it? So if you've ever felt like that, you're not alone. I've been there too. And that's exactly why we're having this conversation today, because what you're feeling isn't failure. It's just a sign. It's a sign that you're now ready to reconnect and to return home to yourself. For over 30 years, I worked as a transformational leader. I think I've shared that, in the tech industry that revolved around leading people through change. So every detail, every interaction, every decision, it was about creating experiences that made them feel seen, feel valued, feel cared for. It was like so special for the person on the receiving end. But somewhere along the way, I stopped extending that same care to myself. I became exceptionally good at simplifying the complexity for others, but I was always living in a constant state of inner complexity, chasing success, seeking validations, and ignoring that quiet disconnect that was just growing within me. And it wasn't that I wasn't successful. Let me tell you, I was sought after consultant, so I was very, very successful, but I was disconnected. I was disconnected from myself, disconnected from my purpose, disconnected from the bigger picture of why was I here. I was great at explaining to my clients, this is your organizational vision, this is the mission, and this is how you fit into the organizational, this is your role and responsibility. But I could not do the same for myself of a bigger picture. What am I doing? What was this all about? And where is this headed to? And that disconnection is what kept me stuck in that cycle, in the loops of just burnout, heading towards burnout. And that misalignment had to be fixed. Because I told you I was just slapped labels all over, right? So I was a transformational leader, and I thought for 30 years, I thought transformation was about changing things outside of me. It was all about optimizing systems, the teams, the processes, the outcomes. For 30 full years, I did just that. I led organizations through digital transformations. I guided thousands of people to embrace technology joyfully, and I helped teams adapt to change that often terrified them. So I became the fixer, the one people came to when things got hard, and I loved it. I loved it until at one point I just could not take it anymore. Distinctly remember telling my husband, like, it was a well-paid consulting job, but no amount of money could keep me in that consulting job because it was so disconnected. I had to figure out something different. So I thought maybe if I became an employee, things might be different. And I went from a consulting position to an employee position, right? Again, fixing it on the outside. But I did the same job. It was the same task, same roles, similar roles. So somewhere between those constant conference calls, the client deliverables, and the endless things of list to do, I stopped hearing my own voice. I had built an identity, the facade of who I was. I was that the identity of being capable. I was the reliable one. I was absolutely unstoppable. But the truth was that I was running on fumes. My battery had depleted so low that even I had difficulty recognizing it until COVID came along. And with that came the unraveling. COVID was like the red flag that I had ignored. Suddenly, all those red flags demanded to be seen. And I kept telling myself, no, I'm fine, I can keep, I just needed to push through. But one morning, I realized I wasn't fine. I was on a way to a meeting and I had all my deck ready, the PowerPoint that showed all the accomplishments and how our successes translated into the ROIs that I was prepared to lead the conversation. In the back of my mind, all of that chatter was going on, but the other side of me, was, okay, so you checked, you double checked, you practiced, you prepared for all sorts of curveballs that could have been hurled at me. But what I was not prepared for was that disconnect. It was like the rubber band that you keep stretching, and then at some point that elasticity just breaks. And that's exactly what happened between these two parts of the mind. That disconnect had stretched so far, and I was so far off the mark that my mind refused to cooperate anymore. And like a switch that just turns on or off, I slammed hard on the brakes and decided I could not function like this anymore. Did I have an alternate plan? Nope. There was no plan B. There was no other fallback. There was nothing else that I could do, but that internal switch that had switched off, it just like switched off all the plugs and my entire network went down. And I had to finally admit that I could not continue like this anymore. And admitting that to even myself felt like a failure, a big failure. And so it just seemed easier to quit than to ask for help, because if I wasn't the strong one, then who was I? My identity was just like, it was like crumbling right in front of me. But that was the best moment that happened, because that was the beginning of my real transformation. Not the kind that you lead with strategy decks or KPIs, but the transformation that happens inside of you in silence, when the only question left to answer is, who am I without all this doing? It took a lot of inner work. Took a lot of executive coaching, reflections, uncomfortable honesty, because I had to now rebuild everything from scratch. But what I learned in that process changed everything. I learned that awareness, true awareness, is not about fixing what's broken, but it's finally seeing what's already there. It's remembering that beneath all this stress, the striving, the perfectionism, there's a self that is calm, steady, and whole. That's when the true meaning of I am enough came to light. Like, I'm already whole. So what am I searching for? Right? Because for years, I thought, like the rest of you, that I had to earn my rest. I had to prove my worthiness. I had to achieve my way into peace. But peace was never something that you have to earn. It's never outside of you. It was just something that I had forgotten. I already have it. Maybe that's where you are too. You've built a life that looks very successful on the outside, but on the inside, there's a quiet ache. The ache that, knowing that you've checked every box, something is still missing. So if that sounds familiar, I want you to know that you're not broken. You're just being invited to come home. Come to the real inner home. Because somewhere along the way on this journey, we just started identifying with wrong things. All this, I am guilty, shiny object syndrome. I am so easily attracted to all these shiny objects. You run after your bodies, fixing your hair color, fixing your skin, fixing your tone, fixing your voice modulations. You fix your titles, you fix your roles, you fix everything, but without realizing that they're just tools. They're instruments that you've been given to navigate this human experience. That's not your true identity. When we forget this truth, life just feels like an endless treadmill. Like no matter how fast you run, no matter how quick fast you run on that treadmill, you never feel you're quite there yet. Because we're chasing happiness outside. You're looking for promotions, for those connections, for the praise, for the possessions, when it was within us all along. I don't need a title to tell me I'm worthy. I don't need another promotion to validate that what I do really matters. Because the ancient wisdom, especially the law of karma, what we call as karma siddhanta, it teaches very clear, very concise, easy to remember. Every action that you take, every thought you nurture, so every action or thought has a consequence. That consequence can either bind you even more or it could free you up. So when you act from ego, fear, or external validations, we just create new attachments and new layers of attachment. But when we act from awareness, alignment, authenticity, we start dissolving that karmic bind on us. You're reducing your karmic debts. And this isn't philosophy. This is not about Vedanta. It's just natural laws. There's a universal law, whether you believe it or not. It's just the physics of the soul. Because that's why so many people, even after decades of success, they still feel spiritually homeless. So awareness is that first homecoming. The moment you pause long enough to notice that the stories and narratives you've been telling yourself, you're so caught up with the stories and the narratives that are happening outside, the drama that you get sucked in, and you start internalizing that. And you've just been repeating those same stories to yourself. But the moment you realize those are just stories, those are just narratives, your worth isn't measured by your productivity. Your rest, your joy, your peace, they're not luxuries. They are your natural state of existence. And here's what I eventually learned. That when you start recognizing these patterns, ask any high-achieving, successful, mid-career women. That may be just you. I was at a executive women's leadership retreat, and we were asked to list our strong points. Every single one of that participants said, "Oh, I'm great at recognizing patterns." And I thought, like, that's me, that's me, that's me. So while I don't have an executive title, but my mindset was already like them. And just like them, every single high achiever was saying, I'm great at recognizing patterns. But when you see the pattern, that all of these external patterns are really a reflection of what's happening inside of you, whatever is happening here is what you're seeing outside, that's when you start reclaiming your power. And that's how this habits framework that I'm going to talk about today was born. It's a system, because we're great at creating systems and processes. If you've read the book Atomic Habits, Adam Grant says, you don't fall to the level of the goals, but you fall to the level of the systems. So without the systems, your processes take you nowhere. You may have very high goals, but you need systemic processes for reaching those goals, achieving those goals. So this habits framework, again, that's a system, but not a system for doing more. It's just for becoming more conscious of how you show up. Because true transformation is not about adding more things. You've already got what you need. You don't need anything else extra. You just have to learn how to peel back all these layers so you can reveal your own beauty. When you peel off all those layers, you see how beautiful you are, your own self. When you make that connection, that's the best moment I had. So the good news is you can come home to yourself. You can shift from that disconnect to harmony. You can shift from doing to being, shift from striving to serving. And that's where that habits framework comes in. HABITS. Keep that in mind. H is from going from the transformation that happens at that first level, at the very superficial level. And by the way, this is not a self-help formula. It's just a return to self system that is grounded in timeless wisdom and modern psychology. I've studied Vedanta for 25 years, so it cannot but seep through my talks, my being, my way of showing up. Right? So the H part of it is going from the transformation that happens when you go from being helpless to happiness, or helplessness to, my H was harmony. And when you are in harmony, you are happy. So that's that first milestone. And again, I just want to set the stage. Let's get clear on something before we go any further, that on this journey, on this yatra, you need 2 points. Point A, where you are right now, to point B, where you want to go. So B in this case is that harmony. I want to be in harmony with myself and with others also, and of course the world around you. But most of us are stuck at this point A. Point A is where you feel misaligned, overwhelmed, disconnected, and just stuck in cycles that don't serve you. And that's A-okay, because we're not going to stay at this A point much longer. The habits framework is the map that gets you, and you can customize it for yourself. How do I get from point A to point B? One step at a time. So to start that journey, you just have to lock in these 2 coordinates. Point A is where you are right now. Point B is where you want to go. There was a time I shared with you when I felt utterly helpless. Not because things were falling apart, quite the opposite. From the outside, everything looked picture perfect. But inside, I felt like I was losing myself. Every success felt fleeting. Every challenge felt heavier. And no matter how much I achieved, there was something else. There was an ache of something unfinished. And it wasn't an unfinished project. It wasn't an unfinished task. It was as if that happiness that I was seeking was one goal away. Maybe one more project, maybe one more task, maybe one more meeting might make me feel happy. But here's what I realized. I was waiting for the outside world to make me happy, waiting for someone to notice, someone to appreciate, someone to validate. And that's probably the trap you are caught in too. When our happiness depends on something outside of us, guess what? You've already handed your keys of happiness to them. So that's when I made a radical decision. I can't believe I did that, but I decided I'm going to stop waiting and I'm going to choose happiness exactly as life was, not as I wished it would be. Because that's where the disconnect was happening. Life was wanting to unfold in a certain way, but I wanted it to be something different. So when these two weren't mirroring each other, it was like, life's giving me this, but I want that. And it wasn't going to match because the universe has its own way of reaching out. And had I just jumped on this system of the universe, my happiness would have been found long way back when. The sooner you jump on this universal system, the sooner you will realize that happiness is you. You are that. Happiness isn't found in the absence of problems. It's found in the presence of peace. And we've already established that you are peace, you are joy, you are that. So if you're listening right now and you feel helpless, I want you to try something. Just pause. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, What would it look like if I chose happiness right here, right now? Not when the project ends, not when somebody else changes, not when life becomes easier, not when blah, 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 right now. That's the first step. I have a choice. I am aware I have a choice. I am not going to be just pushed by the waves of things that, the winds are so strong, it just pushes me out. I have a choice. Sometimes even in that storm, I can still choose to be happy. When it's raining in the storms, you can still choose to just dance. You have a choice. So in our professional lives, we are so used to addressing the customer's pain points, right? And somewhere we forget the pain of this modern achiever. So at some point, I hope you look at your life and wonder, how did I end up here, right? Because you may have, your career might be thriving. Your family is a very stable one. You have plenty of accolades and achievements and awards. Everything is there. Yet deep down, you feel empty, exhausted, invisible. Maybe you've caught yourself thinking, I have everything I could have ever wanted, but that little whisper inside of you keeps saying, something's missing, something's missing, something's missing. So you see, this is a silent ache of the high achiever, the woman who has mastered the outer world, but lost touch with the inner one. You're driven, capable, admired, but you're also drained out because you're trying to become someone else's version of success. And that's the heaviest mask to wear. Again, if that sounds familiar, just take a deep breath because you're not alone. You're not broken. You're simply disconnected from the self. So what's the solution? Reconnect with yourself. As simple as that. Easier said than done, agreed. But for years, I thought my burnout was from overwork. I was working maybe 45, 50, 60 hours. It wasn't the hours. It was the unconscious why behind those hours. I was trying to prove my worth through my output. And every time I accomplished more, I simply raised the bar higher, higher, higher. Thinking it was ambition, but guess what? That's not ambition. That's addiction. When I caught myself with that, I was like, I've got to break this addiction. So awareness is the moment you pause and say, wait, whose story am I even living? Awareness is not judgment because that's just what you realize what just happened. Do not judge. It's simply observation with compassion. I needed so much compassion to just be kind and gentle to myself, and then everything changed. So you might just start by noticing patterns. When do you feel drained? When do you feel alive? Who are you when no one's watching? Because that's your real self. Beneath all that noise, the conditioning, the expectations, that's the part of you that's waiting to be seen by you. We're so focused on just serving and pouring ourselves out, we've never learned to reconnect and to pour that same love, compassion, kindness, empathy to ourselves. Because you can't fix what you won't face. Very, very uncomfortable. It takes a lot of courage to just come to terms, but when you face it with awareness, not with judgment, you don't just fix whatever's needed to be done. You free yourself because you understand the patterns. You understand where this is all stemming from, right? So that was when that transformation happened. And that simple awareness itself was enough for my happiness. But that was just on the superficial. There were layers and layers and layers that I had to cut through. So from the H, now let's go to A was part of it was awareness. That is what led me to my second step, right? I was operating on autopilot. So that's the point A and point B. So now I know I want to be happy. I know I want to live a harmonious life. And in trying to understand where I was, I realized I had that victim mentality, helplessness, and I was operating on autopilot, running routines, fulfilling expectations, meeting standards that were never, first of all, not even set by me. It was somebody else's standard set for me. And I said yes to everything when my other side of me wanted to scream, saying, no, enough. But I still kept taking projects. I took projects that drained me because I didn't want to disappoint anyone. I measured my worth by how useful I was. I thought that was service, useful to others. But that was the autopilot mode because it was a survival mode just disguised as productivity. The masks we wear, oh my gosh, once you start unpeeling those layers, you realize that this productivity is just me being on survival mode. And that awareness, that level of awareness was liberation. When you pause long enough to ask, why am I doing what am I doing? And you actually listen for the answers, that's the moment that I realized how much of my life was run just on default settings. Never took time to examine those, never took time to see what were the underlying beliefs and behaviors, that narratives I was telling myself. I had just assumed, I had never evaluated those. And once I saw that, it's like once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's the power of awareness. It doesn't demand change, it invites change. So here's your reflection. What's one area of life that just feels heavy and being on repetitive mode? Ask yourself, am I operating from awareness where you want to be? That's your point B. Or is it just being on autopilot? I'm just doing this because, just cause, right? That's where we need to remember that awareness, again, is not about judgment. It's just curiosity. Am I operating out of awareness or am I on that autopilot mode? That's the transformation you want to take, because through awareness, then it becomes where you want to align. Because remember, what you cannot observe, you cannot transform. So for that level of transformation to take place, and that's again what I do as a transformational coach, except that this is not digital transformation, this is inner transformation. We're going from H now down to a deeper level of A, and that A is so beautiful. A was for alignment. A was for awareness that took me to alignment, and you realize that this is where my inner and outer world need to be harmonized. Alignment means that my thoughts, words, and actions are in sync with what I say, but that's also how you live. Does my life reflect the values that I stand for? On the outside, you might think, yes, you do, but on a deeper level, just keep going further and further down, because alignment means you're living in sync with your values, your energy, your truth. It's saying yes to what feels right and having the courage to say no to what doesn't feel right. And you'll know that pretty quick, because misalignment shows up as stress, resentment, exhaustion. You already have that compass inside of you. You just need to recalibrate with that internal compass, because when you're aligned, it just feels like go with the flow. It feels so easy and it feels so peaceful. And when you're misaligned, that ease becomes a disease. That's why ease and dis-ease, they are just opposite of each other. Alignment is ease, misalignment is a disease. You already know what's in alignment with yourself. So let me share something else with you that changed my life. You are not meant to balance everything. You are simply meant to align with what matters to you. Because when you align your thoughts, words, emotions, actions with your deeper truth, you stop swimming upwards. You just start flowing, go with the flow. That's when you're going with the flow. not fighting against it. So before you say yes to anything, ask yourself, is this aligned with the version of the person I want to become? And if the answer is no, that's your soul asking for a boundary. Please respect it. Boundaries aren't barriers, they are bridges to balance. This is just a preview for the HAB. I'm just giving you that B is that balance, the bridge to balance. That's where you learn to draw boundaries. So alignment doesn't mean everything is perfect. It just means you're at peace even when it isn't perfect. That example that I showed you, universe is unfolding life in a certain way. Accept it. That's your A. You will be at peace because that's where the universe is actually trying to teach you something. You just have to accept it and ask yourself, what am I supposed to learn in this episode, in this unfoldment? So in my life, alignment came when I stopped trying to be everything to everyone. You can't. And I just started showing up as the truest version of me. A also is authenticity. That truest version of me was the most authentic. And that takes a lot of courage. Because alignment requires you to let go of what doesn't fit, even if at some point it was fitting. You were just habituated. You were just used to saying yes because you didn't know you had another option. So, because that was your people-pleasing habits, wanting to say yes to everything, signing up for everything, and learning to say no was something that I had to learn the hard way. Because there's a risk you could be misunderstood for the sake of being authentic, but that's where your power lies. When you align, you stop chasing and you start attracting. Because you start now operating at certain frequencies, and if that frequency is of peace, the outside environment and the outside situation, the people, the places, the things you attract are also of the same frequency, which is of peace. But if you operate at a lower frequency of constantly being stressed, worried, depressed, and anxious, guess what are you attracting? The same chaotic behaviors and situations is what you will be attracting when you operate at those lower frequencies. This literally broke my heart in one of the groups that I am part of. This is what she said. I don't know why, but every time I have to present in front of executives, I get this knot in my stomach. And that made me want to read. It used to be me at one point. Continue reading. My heart races, my voice shakes, my mind just goes blank, even though I know my stuff. It's not that I don't prepare. That just broke my heart. I actually over-prepare, but the pressure of being in that room with senior people makes me feel so anxious. I keep thinking of, how do I sound? What are they thinking? Am I even making sense at all? If I really want to get better at this, I really do. I'm asking for help. I want to feel calm. I want to feel being at peace. I want to feel confident. I don't want to feel I'm terrified every time. Has anyone ever felt like that? I was like, oh my gosh. So I'm not alone in this. Other people in this group are also feeling the same way. That's because now, can you see how this misalignment shows up? You are now preparing for your executives, for somebody else. It's just been there, done that, moved on. It clearly showed me that this is where the misalignment was, because otherwise, why would she have knots in her stomach? Why would the voice keep shaking? Why would the heart race? All the while, so many unanswered questions. There's a lot of deep work that's going to be required to resolve this. It's not a one-stop shop. It's not a 1 week or a one-time attempt. It's going to take layers and layers of unpeeling for the authentic self to show up, so that regardless of how you are, whether you're in front of an executive or whether you're in front of your colleague, your presentation and your style and your convictions should not change. So again, ask yourself, what's one decision I can make today that brings me closer to alignment? Because every time you act from alignment, you strengthen that inner compass, and that compass will never lead you astray. Guess where it's going to take you? It's going to bring you back home. Home is where you're going to be so at peace, so safe. You don't have to put on a mask. You know, you've been running on empty so far right now, trying to meet expectations that don't even belong to you. So this is your invitation. This is your moment to come home to yourself, to remember you are not your roles. You are not defined by your achievements. You are not your mistakes. You are awareness itself. Last one of those episodes, we talked of ABC. That was that awareness. You are the awareness. You are consciousness in motion. You're here to learn, to evolve, and ultimately liberate yourself from the cycles that keep making you wanting to shrink the room, just shrink to fit the room. You're not here to keep yourself small. You're here to shine, baby. Take up space. So the journey from disconnection to harmony begins with one single decision, the decision to wake up. Because transformation isn't about becoming something new. It's about remembering who you already are. So ask yourself, what's one area of your life that's calling for awareness? What's that one choice that would bring you closer to alignment? What's that one shift that could maybe take you closer to being in harmony with yourself and with others? So this is your invitation to begin. And when you do that, when you accept that invite, life will begin responding differently. Because the moment you change your energy, everything, your entire reality just changes. So go take stock. And we've walked through these milestones from helplessness to harmony. From there, you've come down to awareness, being in alignment, showing up in your authentic self. You know, this transformation doesn't happen in one grand leap. It's those micro moments. So every time you choose, making a choice to choose awareness over avoidance, alignment over approval, balance over busyness. Each of those micro shifts, micro moments is where you're unpeeling and letting go of all those habitual patterns that have just like masked upon us. And it's going to take a lot of unpeeling, one layer at a time. That's how you shine, and that's how your brilliance shines. Not because you become someone new, but because you finally stop dimming who you've always been. So here's your next step. Take 5 to 10 minutes today, maybe just 10 minutes, and journal about where you are on these milestones. So ask yourself, where do I still feel helpless? Where am I living on autopilot? What awareness has revealed? What has awareness revealed so far? Right? Because awareness is the seed. Reflections, that's the water. And action, even the smallest one, is that warm sunlight that just helps you grow. So if today's conversation resonated with you, or if you felt seen, heard, or gently awakened, I invite you to stay with me on this journey. Because in the next couple sessions, we are going to move into the other bits, BITS, of the habits framework, where we are going to learn about balance, integration, transformation, and I hope it was self-realization. But even if you just build a sanctuary for your own peace, for your own stillness, it's much better than where we are now. So I invite you to come home, join me on this yatra, because that's where all the magic happens. That's where awareness turns into embodiment and purpose becomes peace. So until then, remember, you're not the storm, you are the calm beneath it. You're not chasing joy, you are joy. So let's return home together. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. Share this with someone who may need a reminder that joy is still so within reach. You just have to uncover it. And if you're ready to begin your journey of awareness and alignment, I'll create a free reflection guide somewhere in the notes. It's a small step towards your big shift. So send me an email at maneesha@myyatra.vip and let's take it from there. Because remember, you're not broken. You're just becoming whole again. And I can't wait to walk the rest of this path with you. So let's close with closing prayers and may peace prevail. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Thank you.